Greetings for the ones who are watching this video. I'm Daniel Rojas. I'm presenting an American Renaissance. We will be regarding literature aspects mainly. Firstly, we need to know what American Renaissance is about. Well, it is defined as a literary period when many movements gave rise. The main one is called Transcendentalism. I think it is important to know about some history in order to understand everything as a unit. So I just, let's say, outline important dates that deserve to be shown. So we have here three important dates for the United States. The first one is that the capital is moved from Philadelphia to Washington. Next year, Thomas Jefferson is elected as the third president of the United States. Then we have that Louisiana is bought to France on May the 2nd. Later we have Lewis and Clark expedition that aimed to explore the West in order to find a route to the Pacific Ocean. They achieved it next year. Here we have that in 1819 Spain ceded Florida to the United States, and on July the 4th in 1828 the first public railroad is built. Then we have that on May the 28th in 1830, the President Andrew Jackson authorized the Indian Removal Law, which relocated many natives to other territories. In 1834, there is an event called Trail of Tears, when many Cherokee Indians were displaced to Indian Territory from Georgia to Oklahoma. On March the 1st in 1848, Texas is added to the United States. From 1846 to 1848, the United States declared war on Mexico to claim California and some other territories. Mexico ended up giving a wide amount of land. In 1848, the gold rush is a fact. Many people from the east were moving to the west since the Sutter's Mill gold discovery. Well, from this point we have enough information related to the historical background. I think that it's time to move to literature, the thing we are focused on. In terms of literature, as we know, there was something called the spiritual era, when many thinkers decide to reflect about inner life, leaving aside the old patriotism. Indian, Greek, and German philosophers were studied. The concept of transcendentalism appeared. It rejected Puritanism and agreed the Unitarianism. The people who follow this kind of thought try to find the truth, feeling, sense, and intuition, no logic at all. Now we have here some authors I consider important for the movement. Let's start with Ralph Emerson. Here we have his birth date, but what matters is what he made. We have that he is known as the founder of Transcendentalist Club and Dial magazine. He was a lecturer and American scholar. Well, he became a Transcendentalist due to his works. In 1836, he wrote the Statement of Transcendentalist Ideas. It was called Nature. Then we have here this other guy, Henry David Thoreau, who was basically a philosopher who supported the abolitionist ideas. He is known for Walden, that means a reflection of natural life. Here we have a woman called Margaret Fuller. She criticized the 19th century, and all this was expressed in her book titled Woman in the 19th Century. I think it was her main work. The guy aside is William Channing, who was a poet mainly. His, let's say, masterpiece was published in 1843 and is called Our Amateur Poets. We have here two more transcendentalists, Amos Bronson and Louisa May. Talking about Amos, I can say that he was a pioneer of education in the States. His main work is Conversation with Children on the Gospels in 1836. Then we have Louisa May, who is actually Amos' daughter. She wrote Little Women in 1839. Luckily, it was a success or hit. Later, she wrote short stories and steady stream books, listed here. As they were transcendentalists, there were people against them. We could call them anti-transcendentalists, essentially thinkers who opposed to transcendentalism because they thought transcendentalists ignored the dark side of human nature. On this slide we have Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was someone with strong Puritan beliefs. He wrote about human society. Some of his works are listed here. They all criticized the transcendentalism, especially the one that he wrote in 1852. Here is another author called Herman Melville. He was a sailor, and that influenced his writing because most of his works are related to the cruel reality of sea life. He wrote with detailed information. So his main work is Moby Dick. This is an analysis of the fight between light versus dark. However, dark side wins. Edgar Allan Poe is someone who contributed a lot for American literature. He made 3 important contributions. We have the short story, poetry, and the criticism. He thought that intelligent criticism could develop the country. Poe was strongly interested in psychology and the dark side of the human being. He created the modern detective stories that examine mysteries. In terms of poetry, he cared about the sound rather than the form. We can see that The Raven, written in 1855, the rhythm allows the reader to hear the bird's beak hitting the door. Now we'll be revising some aspects of the Civil War and the Gilded Age. In terms of the historical background, we have in this period a common topic, the slavery. In 1850, there were debates of slavery in the new acquired states. The slave trade was forbidden. In 1852, a special book titled Uncle Tom's Cabin promoted the anti-slavery feeling. The same year, Abraham Lincoln is a notorious politician due to some debates, and later, in 1860, is elected as the United States President. In 1861, many states, let's say, shaped the Confederacy, and Jefferson Davis is the president there. Then we have the Civil War, that was a conflict between the states of the North and the South over the expansion of slavery into the Western states. The Southern states began the war in Charleston on April the 1st, making an insurrection act attacking the Fort Sumter. In 1862 to 65, there were many bloody battles that were called the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Shiloh, and Nashville. On May the 10th, in 1865, most of the Confederate armies had surrendered and Jefferson Davis was killed. The same year, the President Lincoln is murdered. We have effects after the Civil War. The main one is the emancipation, in which 3.5 million of slaves were free. As a result of the war, there were 5 million of casualties. The slavery was abolished, and industrialization had a big growth. Talking about the Gilded Age, we need to know that it was an era of technological advances from 1870 to the 20th century. So I listed some important events for you to read in this period of time. Well, I will tell you some important aspects about the Gilded Age. We have growth in terms of industrialization, capitalism, urbanization. We have immigration. Also, there are labor organizations and corporations that were formed. New markets appear, as well as new technologies. These new technologies were engaged to oils and railroad expansion. We have some authors here. I will begin with Walt Whitman, who was focused on poetry. He purposed the free verse. The form in a poem was more important than the sound, and in his words he used to describe the American life. His main work is titled Leaves or Grass. Then we have Harriet Stowe, too. She wrote novels, and the main one was Uncle Tom's Cabin, in which she expressed anti-slavery ideas. She made speeches related to this feeling as well. George Washington Cable was a writer who showed differences between Creole cultures and Protestants. Sarah Orne wrote realistic short stories showing the particularities of societies. She made part of local choral school of realism, and she used symbols too in works like In a White Heroine. Bret Harte contributed providing a model of westerns. He used to include humor in his works. We have Joel Candor, who popularized the Negro folklore. He wrote fables, and a special feature of his writing was that the weak character used the brain to defeat the strong.
Mark Twain. His real name was Samuel Langhorne, and basically he criticized society and many problems through the humor. He worked on newspapers. As he was a river pilot, some of his works are influenced to this field. His works are an inner reflection of morals. In terms of his works, we know there are many. He tried to express a feeling in each of them. So we have Life on the Mississippi. We have the celebrated Jumping Frog that made him famous. We have Innocents Abroad. There he tried to express the hatred he had to European aristocracy. Then we have the Gilded Age, and it is a criticism to the morality of the American society in the post-war period. He said that America was losing its original idealism. The most popular work is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and it is a story of bad boys seen from an adult perspective. Finally, but not last, we have The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and it is a description of the evil world, criticizing laws and slavery, even the morality.
Okay, now let's talk about the era of realism and naturalism. Four main aspects led to the development of these movements. The first was the Civil War. Then we have the industrialization. Due to the Industrial War, there was the urbanization, and finally imperialism took an important role. Civil War. There was a few interest in imaginative and romantic literature. On the other hand, industrialization took a higher pace scale than it did in Europe and led to the creation of the factory. The urbanization meant a growth of the cities, expanding population, and the rise of corporate business. Imperialism was the building of the transcontinental railroads. Realism presents a careful description of everyday life, usually of the lower and middle classes. It began in the mid-19th century. Realistic novels avoid the sensational dramatic elements of naturalistic novels and romances. In 1875, readers were moving toward realism. Realism was an ideology for them. Now we have William Dean Howells. He created the first theory for American realism. In 1891, Howells became the editor of Harper's Monthly in New York City. He made this a weapon against Romanticism. Howells was able to support younger writers such as Mark Twain, Henry James, Emily Garland, and Stephen Crane. Most of Americans, including Howells, realized that business and businessmen were the center of the society. It doesn't mean that authors had to make society look worse than it was. Let's talk about Ethiopian novels. It was the ideal society. Let's see Edward Bellamy. He wrote the most famous American utopian novels. In looking backward, he wanted to criticize capitalist America of the 80s of this century. Henry James was realist. He was not naturalist. He was an observer of the mind's psychological realism. According to his writings, Americans are always being tested by European civilizations. Naturalism was the idea that art and literature should present the world and people just as science shows they really are. This term was created by the French Émile Zola. He believed people were not free at all. Lives, opinions, and morality were all controlled by social, economic, and psychological causes. The first American naturalist was Stephen Crane. He wasn't much influenced by scientific approach. His greatest novel was The Red Badge of Courage. It was set in the Civil War. The Open Vote shows how life and death are determined by fate. Harold Frederick in The Damnation of Theron Ware attacks contemporary religion. It shows the worst side of America's common people. Novels written in the 90s expressed deep doubts about the progress of American society. The literature of Hamlin Garland was a form of social protest. He also developed a writing method called Veritism, which means truth. Finally, Ambrose Bierce. He was not realist, either naturalist. He wasn't interested in the struggles of ordinary people. He loved to describe terrifying events and strange forms of death.
Okay, I am going to talk about the Roaring Twenties and the Lost Generation. Okay, the 20s was like the best era ever. It was a period of time when plenty of wonderful things happened, like personal freedom, dancing, jazz, movies, radio, and so on. However, it was also a period full of poverty and racism, with gangsters and illegal liquor. And what we call the Roaring Twenties was the time of having fun, and spending a lot of money. So with with spending money, the age of consumerism began. So people bought cars, which was the most important consumer product on the 20s. Also they bought radios, fridges, washing machines, etc. And yeah, as you can notice, people of this time not only want to have a new life, but also much more fun. Okay, about jazz music. With the immigration of African Americans, the jazz was introduced to America, most of all in New York and Chicago. The younger generation loved the freedom they felt on the dance floor with jazz, but some older people, didn't like this kind of music. They think this was vulgarity and depravity. But men and women started to dance charlestons and some other dance. Charleston was like the most representative dance in the 20s, in the roaring 20s. Okay, women's new style of life. Yeah, the term flapper appeared. It refers to the women's new style of life. A women which bobbed hair and short skirts, who drank, smoked cigarettes, which had a great impact in the society in that time. The cigarettes. Also, women was more sexually free than previous generations, and in this epoch, women were able to vote. It was very important for them and for us as women. And they stopped wearing long skirts and used to wear the latest fashion. Nevertheless, they weren't as free as they wanted. Women were unpaid and were still housewives. About liquor. Liquor. People used to drink a lot of liquor and alcohol, but on 1919, the 18th amendments to the Constitution banned the manufacture and sale of intoxicating liquors and started to close every tavern, bar, and saloon in the United States. As a result of this prohibition, people started to sell liquor illegally, and it was worse. And bootleggers, racketeers, and gangsters influenced this way of smuggling. And important man of that time, he was a gangster, Alphonse Gabriel Capone, known as Al Capone, the most representative and maybe the most important gangster in that time. Okay, but well, however, not all Americans had the opportunity to live a life with positive changes, like having the characteristics and important things, happy things on the running 20s. While African Americans suffered of racism, farmers did not have the proper prosperity in the 20s. So the creation of one of the most representative social group constituted for Americans. It was called KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. They were against the black people, and they were so cruel and didn't respect the black people's right. So the persecution of black population still exists in that time. Okay, about the lost generation. Well, this term was introduced for first time by Gertrude Stein but Ernest Hemingway was the person who made the term popular. The Lost Generation was a group of American writers that emigrated to Europe from the World War I to the Great Depression. The most representative writers of this group was Gertrude Stein, Ernest Hemingway, Scott Fitzgerald, T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, John Dos Passos, John Steinbeck, and William. And okay, about Gertrude. Well, she was born on February 3 on 1874 in the United States. She was a literary innovator, woman, and pioneer of modernist literature. Her work broke with the narrative, linear, and temporal conventions of the 19th century. In 1933, Stein published a kind of memoir of her Paris years, and well, it's called The Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas. She also published some other books like QED and Three Lives on 1905. Okay, Ernest Hemingway. Well, he was one of the great American 20th century novelists. He was very important in this time and also in this moment. He was born on July 21 on 1899 in Cicero, America, United States. He was renowned for novels like The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms, and The Old Man and the Sea. The Sun Also Rises was the most important novel of him, and well, with The Old Man and the Sea, he won the 1953 Pulitzer. In Paris, Hemingway soon became a key part of Gertrude's train, what famously is called the Lost Generation. He also published 7 novels, 6 short story collections, and 2 non-fiction works. Okay, Scott Fitzgerald. He was born on September 24 on 1896 in America. His works were the paradigmatic writings of the jazz age. She wrote short story and novels, and he was known for his the most famous novel of him, The Great Gatsby. He also published three other books, which was called The Side of Paradise, The Beautiful and Damned, and Tender is the Night.